So after World War II, we bombed Japan really bad. We took out about 119 of their major cities and most of their industrial infrastructure. From there, we went back in. It was the United States and Europe and much of the UN, and we helped them rebuild everything. And this was back in the 50s, and slowly but surely, throughout the next 30 years, things started to pick up for them. Okay. So one of the main things that really helped Japan in their manufacturing was their implementation of just-in-time manufacturing. In doing this, what they did was they made just enough of the product that they needed for the time being, and it really helped with the costs of it and everything, because they didn't have to have the warehouses and everything else to store it, which really saved them quite a bit. And they also went into the market with the lower quality products, and eventually, like once they got established there, they would move up and build better and better ones until they were the same or even better quality than the ones that were already out on the market. And one of the things that really helped them to start up and get going was the risk taking that they did. Like early on, they would invest a lot of money really soon in order to get the machinery that they needed and the training for like everybody so they could do their job. And one main thing that Japan does that we really don't do all that much is the employees of like many industries. Like once they're there with one of the major companies, they can stay there for a while, and even if the younger, more experienced workers, like the more knowledgeable ones, are right out of school, like once they're in on their entry level, and like after they're there for a while, they move up into the company, and like even if your knowledge is like older and outdated, like you can still move on to something such as sales or management even. And they also put a lot of money from the government into the industries, and they had like incentives for developing exports. They also got money for starting up their infrastructure, and they also had some really nice tax breaks when needed, and that really helped the businesses to get established and to keep growing. One of the examples that we used in our lectures was that of lowering production costs. This was illustrated in the $10 box model, and in order for the top hat guy to get more money, we would take away some of the lower workers here and utilize the automation process, which is using many of machines in order to replace those workers. And those machines, like, they'll work longer hours, they don't need a lunch, they don't need to get paid, they don't complain about work conditions, they just go and go and go. And after the initial cost is there, like, the only thing that they really need is to perform maintenance on them every now and then. Japan has really also utilized outsourcing too, and they've been using some of the surrounding countries such as China and India. They're there because you get really cheap labor, and that lowers the overall cost, adds more profit. And also, one problem that they had to overcome was the fact that they're a very small island with very few natural resources. And in order to get those resources, they would use, like the other countries that are around the world, the periphery, and they would get their resources that were imported very cheaply. Okay, so as we move now into the 60s and 70s, we see a different form of business that's being used. Prior to that, the government was taking a protectionist approach to the medium-sized and smaller businesses. But in that period, things changed around a little bit, and we see a larger series of acquisitions and mergers, which led to larger companies. And now we're also seeing outsourcing that was within the same country. Like, the very large businesses were using these smaller ones in order to do their bidding, much like we see now in the automobile industry here in the United States. We see like the large manufacturers like General Motors using Delphi in order to make certain parts, like their steering components and everything. And initially, this led to very large profits for the bigger businesses, and everyone that was working there, they were also making more money because more of that was going to them. And this money went into savings bonds and other forms of savings that were directly involved with the company. And in doing this, the money that they had saved up, their employer could also use that money that was there and borrow against it and grow larger and larger and larger. And once things got going really good for Japan, they started exporting so much that they had a enormous trade surplus that was going on. And this is going in, like, mainly into the 80s. And they were manufacturing and exporting so much and not importing as much. And there was a lot of countries that were around the world that were getting really upset with this. And they threatened to not import any of the stuff that was being exported from Japan. And so they had to straighten out the relations and equalize their budget there in order to satisfy some people that were around the world. And in doing this, it really hurt the industries, as we see into the late 80s and early 90s, when the profits started going downhill slightly. And during the same time period, we really see businesses are going back more towards privatizing, and the government was stepping out with their help. And during this time period, this is when everything went downhill really, really bad. This was at the end of the 20th century, and for about 15 years, we've seen almost no economic growth out of the electronics and manufacturing industries from Japan. Everything stagnated really, really bad. And after about 15 years of this or so, the government realized that they had to step back into the equation if they were going to save the industry. Okay. And one thing that really helped to save Japan was the fact that they were sending their scientists out to other countries such as China, but especially India, because now their population is really aging. Everybody's getting older. There's a lot more older people, and there's a lot less younger people that are actually in school and in the industry of the high-tech manufacturing. So they're really losing out there, and it's overall the economy is really being hurt as a whole. And now, as we're into the 21st century, we see a major change in Japan using us, especially the United States, because what they'll do is they will ship over manufacturing, so say for Honda or Sony and stuff, and they will relocate around areas of knowledge, like universities and already existing industries that are here in the United States. So that way they got almost endless supply of students that are there fresh out of college. After the downfall, it was a slow process of building things back up, but slowly but surely Japan is growing back to the way that they were. The one industry that's going to really save Japan in the future is the robotics industry. Them, along with the United States, are leading the way in making robots that will one day, they said in about 15 years or so, I'm going to be able to do lots of work around the house, and this will be especially helpful for the elderly people and the disabled in order to make them stay on their own much longer, and it'll also reduce the medical costs and healthcare. And for now, we see the Japanese economy still growing and growing, and now they're back as #1 in the world for manufacturing overall, and everything's going great for them, and we'll see what the future holds. Everything's looking good so far.